Thank you very much for being here this afternoon. In my late teens, I often expressed my feelings and took note of the conditions around me by writing on different pieces of papers. I wouldn't call it journaling, but I wrote and kept my notes, just as I kept greeting cards and letters that people wrote to me. I still have some of these letters to this day, some written to me over 40 years ago. Now, I often felt as though I didn't want to forget a moment in my passing life, although writing a book wasn't on my mind at that time. I always felt somehow that I might need the information in the future. Later in life, I contemplated writing my autobiography, but as is often the case with big ventures, it took the persistent nudging and support of an old friend to actually start putting my thoughts together to write my book. The journey from our first conversation about writing in June 2013 to publication in 2023 took almost 10 years. Now, I've come to believe that it took me that long to move from my initial musings about writing to completing the autobiography, because there were experiences that I needed to go through, lessons that I had to learn, including clarity of thought on key issues and confidence in expression that I could only gain with time. So I believe that God's timing for everything is perfect.
Yes.
Now, my parents, Miss Rebecca Musoke and Mr. John Luswata, were both foreign students in the United Kingdom in the early 1960s. My mother was at a nursing training school in Stratford-upon-Avon, and my father was a student in London at Northern Polytechnic, which is now the University of North London. Now, far away from home and family, they found comfort in each other's company. And so it is then that I was born to a young and married couple in November 1962 in the small town of Warwickshire. Now, in the early 1960s, having a child out of wedlock was scorned upon. My mother, who had overcome incredible odds to secure a scholarship to study nursing, was forced out of the nursing school, and she had to move into a shelter where she stayed for the rest of her pregnancy. Meanwhile, my father, who was also completely unprepared for the new responsibility, lived miles away in London and was somehow or somewhat detached from the actual experience that my mother was going through. Now, in that shelter of unwed young mothers-to-be, a plan had been made that I would be given up to an English family for adoption.
Wow.
The adoption agency had their representative at Leamington Spa Hospital on the day of my birth to ensure a prompt handover. But things didn't quite go as planned. Because when the moment came, my mother yelled in protest, and that sent the adoption agency representative running. My mother got to keep me temporarily. However, with a newborn baby on the one hand and her studies on the other, it became clear to her that she would have to make the toughest choice in her young life. So when I was just 5 months old, my grandfather, Nelson Sebugwao, swiftly made arrangements for me to be brought to Uganda, to be taken to Uganda. From the tender age I grew up in the loving hands of my grandparents on a farm in Kumba village near Entebbe town, far from my parents, both of whom remained in UK. Now, I grew up in a home that was a hub for friends and relatives. Just about everyone was welcome at any time for whatever period they desired to stay. As a child, the togetherness and merrymaking was endearing, and this kind of camaraderie has stuck with me through the years. And given that experience, I value family and living in security with parents in a home. Now, at the age of 7, I finally met my father, and I met my mother 4 years later. Now, by that time, I was secure, comfortable, and confident in the custody and love of my grandparents and their children. I truly considered my grandparents to be my parents and their children my siblings. Now, when I met my parents, I simply was not prepared to let go of that security and to build or explore a new relationship. My young soul couldn't take that. Hence, I never bonded or warmed up to either of them. What I knew without a doubt was that I belonged at my grandfather's farm in Mukumba village. Now, it would take years, in fact, well into my teenage years, for my heart to become emotionally attached to my parents. So the early experiences that shaped me were undoubtedly the vulnerable start, being born to a young couple in the UK, and then my years under the protection of loving grandparents in that fun-filled home at a farm in Uganda. Now, in 1982, at the age of 18, we're fast forwarding, I left Uganda to join my mother in New York, where I spent the next 13 years, furthering my education and later working. It was a transformative culture experience for me as a teenager, living in one of the busiest cities of the world, a complete contrast from the life that I had left behind, the quiet farm school life, and the steady flow of friends in a beloved country that had been rattled and forever changed by war. Now, I had completed my primary and secondary school education in Uganda at highly reputed schools of like Victoria Primary School, Gayaza Primary School, and Wanyange Secondary School. My introduction to higher education in America began at City University of New York, LaGuardia College, before I went into New York University, and later to the New York Institute of Technology. After 13 years in New York, studying and working, I spent the next 5 years working in the Maryland, Washington, D.C. area, stretching my time in the United States to nearly 2 decades. Now, little did I know that at that time, that this extended period of my life studying and working in this melting pot, this distant land into cities that were global hubs for the business world and international diplomacy, was preparing me for the greatest challenge of my life as the Nagginda Queen Consort to a king of the ancient Kingdom of Uganda. I recall fondly my earliest jobs as a young person in telemarketing, as a tour guide, a public information officer, and as a research consultant at the United Nations in New York. I've always had a great love for books and international affairs, and this naturally led me to other professional roles in public relations and business development in Washington, D.C. I worked in nonprofit and corporate positions and consulting roles with companies and organizations such as Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Fannie Mae, Gardner Cummey Associates, PC, and Maximus, where I worked on a World Bank project. Now, I had no idea at that time how important the experience of working in these communication-intense project planning and development roles would be for my future. It is in these roles that I learned the importance of hard work, persistence, teamwork, and the value of commitment to a common goal. Now, the places that gave me purpose and comfort in my life, in my early years, never left me. And during my nearly 20 years studying and working away from Uganda, I always valued being engaged and leading on activities in order to stay connected to Uganda. I did that by reaching out to Ugandans, mostly in the New York and New Jersey area, with whom I formed organizations, created communication materials like newsletters, and we planned events, which enabled us to stay connected to one another and to Uganda. Keen to be of support to our home country and working with others, we sought to raise funds for various development projects, such as the Uganda Women's Effort to Save Orphans, an organization that was supporting children who had lost their parents during the civil war in Uganda in the 1980s. In addition, I remember writing a number of projects while still in school to promote development in Uganda. I remember being stunned and delighted one day when I learned that a public service announcement that I had produced as one of my corporate communication projects was being aired on national television in Uganda. It was encouraging our Ugandans in the diaspora to assist and contribute to development at home. In 1982, I had left Uganda as an unknown teenager, secure in the unconditional love of my larger family and excited about what I imagined would be a new life and opportunities in the United States of America, a country that I had only read about and seen on television. Now, I returned to Uganda nearly 20 years later, on the eve of a new millennium, to an entire population of Uganda Kingdom, expectant and curious to see and to meet the woman who was to marry their beloved king, the Kabaka of Uganda. I had always imagined that I would marry one day, but I had never once imagined that it would be a king. Now, the weight of the duty and responsibility ahead felt instantly heavy. I knew immediately that I was going to need an incredible amount of support to adapt to my new role. Now, at the time of our wedding in 1999, a previous 27-year ban on cultural institutions and monarchies in Uganda had only been lifted. The Kingdom of Uganda was abuzz with activity and expectation as the people worked together to carefully restore tangible and intangible structure and traditions. As a woman, I understood clearly that the position of the Nagginda was a critical platform for nurturing and upholding values that make up our identity as a people, and for addressing issues related to health, education, and community welfare to improve the lives of children, women, and the vulnerable. However, before I immersed myself in the substantive work of development, among the changes that I had to accept were restrictions related to things that I myself could do. I remember about a week after our wedding, I decided I would drive to go and meet friends for lunch. Now, as I approached the gate to exit the palace, 2 security officers jumped into the car and said, "You can't move out by yourself. We are going with you." Now, one of them wanted to take over the wheel, but quickly he realized that I wasn't ready to move, and so instead jumped into the co-driver's seat. Now, I hadn't been briefed on these particular palace rules and protocols. Nevertheless, I reluctantly accepted their company, So with the security on board, I drove to an Italian restaurant, which wasn't far from the residence. After lunch, we made 2 other stops, with me still behind the wheel each time. Now, I could sense the nervousness of the security personnel, especially when we reached a busy intersection. I wasn't sure which direction to take. I had actually never driven in Uganda. The traffic was busy and chaotic, and all around us were blaring horns and inquisitive stares of puzzled pedestrians who I could tell were debating among themselves whether it was really me behind the steering wheel or somebody else who resembled me. So many hours later, after circumventing the traffic, we made it safely back to the palace. And I stopped driving. However, I was able to continue doing many other things that I love. I've always had a love for dance and music. And although my days of moving freely across a dance floor when and as I chose were clearly over, my love and appreciation for the performing arts remained deep. And so I'm thrilled to have been able to start the first ballet school in Uganda in 2004. For 12 years, the Kampala Ballet and Modern Dance School extended the opportunity for hundreds of children and young people to learn life skills through the discipline of dance, and enabled thousands more in the larger community to be touched by the power of performance and music. I have continued for decades to give and to learn through service. I believe it's really important for us all to be of service to others because it keeps us moving forward positively as a society, and we are all beneficiaries of the service and sacrifice of so many people. Now, the culture of the people of Uganda, that Uganda culture, is built upon the ethos of a traditional value system called Ubuntu Bulamu, simply translated as humanness or civility. It appeals to the spirit of community, kindness, compassion, courtesy, dignity, respect, service, and humility. My vision for Uganda is a healthy, educated, and economically empowered population rooted in the values of Ubuntu Bulamu. I founded the Nagginda Development Foundation in 2000. Its vision is to see an equitable, inclusive, and peaceful world grounded in human virtues. For over 24 years now, the foundation has supported numerous health, education, and development initiatives. And the foundation's mission is to leverage culture to improve the economic and social well-being of children, youth, and women in Uganda. For decades, we have registered a number of achievements within the health sector. I have championed health initiatives for women and girls with an emphasis on maternal health, adult and reproductive health, and child health, including nutrition. I have led advocacy campaigns to prevent HIV/AIDS and STDs, promoted parental support for vaccination against childhood diseases, because low vaccination rates had led to troublingly rise in child mortality rates. Through the Nagginda Development Foundation, we have contributed to education by providing scholarships through our bursary scheme that benefited hundreds of primary school girls over a period of 10 years, and we improved on and also built school facilities for children with disabilities and abandoned or orphaned children. I advocated for the rights so education for girls and women in numerous campaigns with the Kabaka Foundation, Kabaka Fund, Child Fund, UNICEF, and Forum for Women, for African Women Educationalists, among others. In addition, in 2018 alone, we reached over 68,000 children and 1,300 teachers in 79 Kampala city schools with our program of Ubuntu Bulamu for improved academic performance and school experience. The foundation has supported youth and women's economic empowerment through agricultural and business skills, skills training and access to financing. And from 2019 to 2022, through a UNDP program to harness youth livelihoods, we trained 23,900 youth and youth in leadership, peace and governance, civic engagement, ICT, and vocational skills. We've also established 213 women village savings loan groups, which have benefited over 7,000 women in 5 years from 2017. And within the same period, we provided over 300,000 adolescent girls and young women with information on HIV/AIDS and prevention of gender-based violence. Currently, 25 youth are employed in the Foundation's sanitary pad cottage factory that provides low-cost sanitary pads for girls and women so that they can enjoy their dignity fully and remain included in all educational and social activities without disruption due to lack of basic menstrual hygiene commodities. In 2007, I established the Nagginda, or what we call the Sapaticha Nagginda, which is an annual training and mentorship camp for children and the youth. It aims to frame attitudes and change mindsets and behavior, and it also fosters skills and talent development. The camps are open to all children and youth irrespective of their ethnicity, religious affiliation, or social standing. And since their inception, the camps have trained and mentored 41,500 children and youth in Uganda and in the diaspora, and they have reached millions through print, broadcast, and social media. Now, the Kisakate camps have been held outside of Uganda as well. For example, in Canada, South Africa, United Kingdom, and here in the United States. This year in June, we shall hold a camp in Dallas, Texas. 2 years ago, we held one in Boston. Now, the journey hasn't always been easy. Now, alongside the many achievements, we've also registered challenges, such as limited funding and inadequate information. Needless to say, we have also learned some lessons which have built us, sustained us, and made us stronger and more effective in what we do. From our earliest days, funds to implement culture and development projects was scarce and hard to secure. Now, while there were numerous opportunities to access funding through different funding agencies, most agencies had a negative bias towards cultural institutions, deeming them as problematic and politically risky. And others viewed cultural institutions as adversarial to indigenous mainstream institutions and establishments. So we were largely passed over by funders. However, over time, funders have come to understand that cultural institutions are indeed a most credible development partner with great influence and credibility among our people, and that we can very easily mobilize and connect with people at massive scale for development and social change initiatives. Now, through cultured leaders, Such programs are more easily trusted and accepted, especially at the grassroots level, where the majority of the population is. Now, as I conclude, I'd like to mention that as Nagginda, I continue to explore the endless opportunities to serve our people, especially in ways that enhance gender equality, while also guaranteeing our women lives of dignity and guaranteeing children access to quality education and healthcare. I am thankful every day to be able to have a most incredible platform to lend my voice and expertise to mobilize for the common good so that our people continue to access opportunities for them to thrive, to grow, learn, and connect. I believe in a great future, and I'm confident that our energies and collective wisdom put generously together today will yield a much better tomorrow for Uganda, and the world. I thank you very much.